Hello and welcome to another Game Nexus hardware review. Today we're going to be taking a look at this controller right here. Now a lot of people who came late to the game with the original Xbox may not recognize this at all, because this was the original controller for the Xbox, of course, if you didn't live in Japan. If you lived in Japan, then you had what was called the Controller S, which, here's a blue one of that right here, and this was the standard controller. And if you see on the screen right now, this is what the Japanese one looked like when it was in the package with all its Japanese going across it. Basically the same controller with some slight color variation, but they figured since Japanese people had smaller hands, they wouldn't really be able to use this all that well because it's such a large controller. And I can honestly say, with every gaming controller I have used, this has to be one of the largest ones, so that's why they released it standard with this. This controller would go on to replace the original controller about in 2002 in America and in 2003 in Europe. Of course, as I had said, it was the original controller for the Japanese Xbox all along, so they never really had to deal with having the original, what a lot of people say, over big controller. Now, what I'm going to say is, this controller is an absolute amazing controller if you have larger hands. If you don't have really little hands, this thing works really well because the way your hands fit on it, you can reach all the buttons just fine like this. And of course, both of the D-pad and the analog stick, and then of course the second little analog stick here. I know what some people complained about was the D-pad on this. If you see this, I don't know how well you can see that. I'm gonna try to get it a little closer. Unlike this, which that's like a regular D-pad, you'll see it has kind of the cross design here, and it's just a regular D-pad. This is kind of really weird. It's like the things here just kind of come up where the D-pad would be, and then it's kind of like a pit, kind of making an X, which, strangely enough, I have to say, it actually works much better than you think it would. And you'll see on the back here, it actually just says Xbox Game Controller, because this was supposed to be the controller that would be for the original Xbox the whole time it was out. And then if you look on the back of this one, it just says Xbox Controller S. Now, as I had said, in 2002 and 2003, they replaced the controller, and you can see a direct size comparison now, how much larger the original, or as it was referred to as, and I believe I put a blurb in the top there, the Duke controller. I don't know why it got the name of Duke, but it was just one of those things. And the cool part is, if you were like me and you liked this controller, it was released as an optional accessory. Well, it was left as an optional accessory because these were available additionally when you could buy them when the console first came out, just like what you see on your screen right now. They just came in the plastic packaging like that. But another big difference is if you look at the buttons, notice how the S controller here has them in a kind of a cross, whereas the original, they were kind of a diagonal here. But one thing I definitely have to say which works better with that, if you use your Xbox for emulation like Capcom games, what was cool, it's these buttons kind of line up very nicely, and you could say play Super Street Fighter 2 and use these as your 6 buttons, whereas with this worked okay. You could kind of go like this, but it didn't work nearly as well as this. I could remember when I first modded my Xbox and I was playing a lot of those Capcom games, I was like, this is the first controller since like Sega Saturn that I had where you had the buttons lined up pretty well. They're not perfect now, but they're lined up pretty well. And just like both these controllers, of course, feature pressure-sensitive buttons that very few games unfortunately used. And of course, if you look on the top of both controllers, they both have the dual accessory slots, which were used for the memory cards. But of course, the biggest problem is, due to the system having a hard drive, the memory cards were kind of a forgotten peripheral. It was kind of cool where you could be like, oh, I'm going to take my save and bring it to my friend's house, And notice this has a little white label, the little silver label as well. It says Xbox memory unit, but the only reason I had actually purchased this was to do the soft mod, which you need one of these if your console isn't modded yet. But my final verdict on this is, if you have larger hands like me, and maybe you find this a little not as great, or you just want a different way to control your games, and you have an original Xbox, I would highly recommend picking one of these up. I would imagine right now, if you go to like most used game stores that have original Xbox stuff, which unfortunately isn't all that many, you could probably find one of these cheap, or if it's one of those places that doesn't take them and they're like taking used stuff, they may even just throw it away and say, hey kid, you want this controller? But it's a very good controller. It feels very nice in your hands. Just like this, it's got the dual rumble motors built in, and I really would highly recommend giving a try to the Xbox Duke controller, especially if you have bigger hands, or, as I had just said, if you feel like you just want to try controlling your games differently. This controller is actually really good. It's one of those many things in this world that, since it got such a bad reputation, the first people who were like, oh, this controller's bad, they told their friends, and then their friends, who had never used one of these, mind you, were like, oh, you know that Xbox Duke controller, it's really bad, you hate it. And they're like, well, you only want to use these, not these. So it's kind of one of those things that kind of got a word of mouth that it was bad. And by the time you got down the chain, everybody who was saying it bad had never actually used one of these. But as I was saying, give this a shot. It's an excellent controller. If you can find one really cheap at a flea market or garage sale or used game store, I'd recommend picking this up. It's a nice way to play your Xbox games that you may not have experienced before. And yeah, I actually highly recommend picking up an original Xbox original controller, or a Duke controller. Well, this has been another Game Nexus quick hardware review, and I shall see you later. Bye.